Welcome to the AI Renaissance podcast. I'm here with my good friend Aman Khan for the very first episode. Aman, welcome. How you doing?
Great. How are you, Karan?
Very well. I'm in Medellin. Been reading and writing about AI for the past month out in the jungle. It's been pretty fantastic. Thank you, first of all, for being my first guest on this podcast. What we do is we talk about what's happening in AI from the creator's perspective. So this is really for people who are looking to enter the space and start building, start creating using these tools, and bring cool stuff into the world. So I know you've been in the space for a long time. For some background, we've known each other since college, which was, for me, like 10 years ago now. Feels crazy to say, but you got into the AI space very early, maybe earlier than anybody else that I know. What was like your first introduction to anything like AI, ML related? I know that's kind of your background.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, I want to say thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here on an inaugural podcast. I know, as you kind of alluded to, I've known you for a long time, and seeing you kind of pick up on various technology and your takes on them, really been enjoying the newsletter you've been putting out too. So yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm
Thank
excited.
you.
So a little bit about me. So I think maybe like some people, like I kind of fell into machine learning a little bit by accident. So I didn't study computer science in school. We went to the same college, but I studied mechanical engineering. But from there, my interest was always around like breaking down, complicated problems, building cool products, and I kind of just did that. I mostly just pursued that out of school. Worked on some consumer electronics companies. Worked at Apple for a little while. Worked on drone delivery, and then actually took a little bit of a break after college, backpacked, and then came back and kind of wanted to find a space and a job that to be honest, I thought would have, funnily enough, like job security. I was like looking at like 10 to 20 years out, what are some jobs that are going to be around that will seemingly have more and more growth? And, interestingly enough, I thought that, the space of automation was always pretty interesting. And I was kind of, had a robotics background and interested in robotics. So I kind of landed up getting kind of lucky and getting a job at a self-driving car company. Now they're in the news a lot, but they're owned by GM. It's called Cruise. So I was back there in like 2018, in the early days, right after some of that initial investment, basically trying to make the car drive itself. As simple as that. In any sort of city sort of, urban environment, which is pretty complex, right? When you think about, like, I live in New York now, we used to live in New York together. Um, trying to navigate the streets of New York as a pedestrian is already challenging enough. Just think how complex of a problem driving in a city like that is. And now if you visit San Francisco, you'll actually see, Waymo, and used to be cruise cars as well out there, basically fully autonomous driving around, which is pretty nuts considering the complexity of that and of that domain. But where I started was on testing the perception stack and understanding, is the code that we're pushing actually making the car better or worse? How do you measure that? And that is actually, in a lot of ways, it's a data science problem as well. It's actually, a lot of analogies now to what we're seeing with like AI and LLMs and all of the sort of the space of sort of probabilistic, non-deterministic models, and how do you understand how they're going to perform in the real world. So worked there for a little while, and then worked at Spotify on the machine learning platform. Think like large data systems, large data platforms. But yeah, my background is technical engineer at heart, and then ended up switching over to kind of be a, sort of in between the user, who's a data scientist, or the consumer, and the technology itself.
Okay. A lot of stuff that I want to get into there. Real quick, what are you working on now? What's your present day,
Yeah.
life looking like within this context?
Yeah, so these days I work on actually it's funnily enough, kind of a continuation of what I was working on at Cruise, which is evaluating black boxes, evaluating these systems. So how do you measure what the performance of these systems are? So from Cruise, I went over to Spotify, and then at Spotify, I found this company called Arize. We're actually an what we call an observability platform for data scientists and machine learning models and engineers. So what that means is when you're actually looking at deploying one of these models, it could be as simple as like classification, right? And yeah, not to trivialize it, but like classifying, is this credit card transaction fraudulent or not fraudulent, to getting to much more complex workflows, like what is the correct way to present Karan with the his Spotify playlist for the day, and what's the right order that we should present music, and then even more complex now with like AI and chat interfaces and generative interfaces of, is this actually a good generation or not? So our job is to look across those systems and help our customers, which are data scientists, understand if their models are performing the way that they expect them to or not. So that's my day job. I'm on the product team there, so I work very closely with the founders and the engineers, and also across the sales team, go to market teams. And then on nights and weekends, I also invest in startups. So I have an angel fund I invest out of. Been investing in AI companies for over the last few years. Before it became AI became this buzzword, in sort of like the earlier days of like the ML sort of platform companies, ML companies, and consumer apps as well, built on top of machine learning tech. So that's sort of that ends up taking up most of my day.
Okay. All right, very interesting. So let's start very fundamental here. You mentioned because I am somebody that has very little experience in this space. I'm coming into this anew. I've been working in the crypto space for like 7 years now, so it's all very new to me. So let's start very basic. You mentioned you worked, you were like investing in ML platform companies. Let's start very basic. What is the difference between ML, machine learning, and AI, artificial intelligence? And then you also mentioned data science, which is kind of like, maybe I don't know if it's a subset or a superset of those things, but how would you define those terms?
Yeah, great question. So I actually think these days the lines are getting a little bit fuzzy in terms of what's how you'd like cleanly break this technology up a little bit. Um, I think you can kind of, artificial intelligence or AI, like is sort of feels like a blanket industry term, and in the sense that of you're basically trying to create a form of what we intelligence, which is defined as, by the way, even if you break down that word, intelligence is the only really the form of intelligence we're trying to create is human intelligence, right? Like it's actually the only form of intelligence we can understand for ourselves because we're human, and so we're trying to create something in the image of our version of intelligence, right? If we were trying to create like, something like an artificial cat, we'd have no idea where to start or end that because we don't know how cats think. So we're trying to create systems that resemble human levels of intelligence. And so if you look at like a self-driving car, there's multiple parts of that stack that are like perception, detection, and sort of prediction. So predicting what people will do, planning, and these are sort of human level terms for how we think psychologically a brain should be able to break down a complex task. The way that we get there is through techniques like machine learning, which are think of these as sort of black boxes that you can train or program a certain way to output data for a certain task. So that might be like a model that is classifying, but it could also be re-ranking or basically performing some type of supervised or unsupervised learning techniques to basically train this black box to perform a task. Data science is a fun one that you bring up as a term as well, because from my understanding, that's sort of an industry or engineering term that was, kind of meant for like PhDs and like math or statistics that are meant to sort of understand behavior and large amounts of data, to basically use them for, making decisions, and almost like think of it as like maybe analogous to like econometrist or something like the statistician. So it's a little bit more of that like science bent, but to me, these like disciplines are all fairly overlapping now in today's world. But I really think that the goal almost feels like AI in a lot of ways, and ML
Yeah.
or data science is the way you get there.
Right. Okay. I was going to say, so ML is more kind of, it's like a specific set of algorithms or kind of the techniques that you use to achieve an end goal, which is to create this artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's how I look at it.
And yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay. And so in your previous work, like, have you mostly been working kind of as a project or as a product manager, like kind of creating these ML systems, or what exactly has your role been, within the context of work?
Yeah, good question. So, I've kind of fallen into like a funny. So I actually started my career building tools to help evaluate these systems. So we would have, at Cruise, we'd look at large amounts of driving data, and we say, okay, is the car getting better or worse across some metrics? Well, that task can be kind of broken up, right? It's like, how do you identify what driving data to look at? How do you define what's better or worse? What are the inputs and outputs of that system? Are you going to look at real data or simulation data? And so my job started. I like my brain is sort of wired in a way where I kind of want to, maybe most people like do as little work here as possible. So I was trying to automate my job. So I ended up writing code that helped me build better reports, build better pipelines to be able to pull down that data and run metrics and compute sort of sort of decisions on top of that and help my customers at the time, who are the real sort of ML engineers who were designing the perception stack, so building the classification, building the detection models. So I wasn't really a model builder. I was more of like, take the outputs of those models and understand, okay, is this actually making the car better or worse? And then as I started automating, little bits of that away and working with my team, I kind of realized that my skill set became being sort of the transform. I think of it as like the transformation function or the communication layer between data scientists and the tools that they needed to answer those questions. So I've kind of in the last like 6 7 years, built primarily more on the infrastructure side, from being super. If folks are in the data analytics space, think like Looker dashboards, Tableau dashboards, to now building tools that do a lot of that in the data pipelines themselves, or can solve very specific tasks for data scientists. So I've been more on the like tooling and infrastructure side to accelerate, no pun intended here, the sort of the work that's going into AI, help it go faster. And then on top of that, a lot of my job is building these days now, trying to understand how, what's the emerging trends from other kind of tools like Vercel or like LangChain. So I build a lot of consumer apps myself. I was at an OpenAI hackathon this last weekend as well, just to like try out, see what's out there, what's painful, how do you make it better, so that we can kind of all collectively, rising tide lift all boats, and hopefully make the space safer. A big part of it is, making it more understandable, sharing what's going on kind of out in the open, doing stuff in open source, and then trying to understand what's painful about machine learning today.
So you've been involved in quite a few different areas within the space. So I think that gives us a nice lens to transition into kind of a more big picture conversation and talk a little bit about, investing, specifically in early stage AI companies. So, um, in the time you've been working in this space and in the different kind of roles that you've had, how have you seen both the applications that are being built and kind of like the stage that we're at, in almost like, I don't know if it's like an end goal of achieving like AGI, or whatever you would say, but and it seems like there's definitely some kind of progression that's happening. um, First of all, I guess to really set the stage for this, like, what is responsible at a technical level for this rapid progression or acceleration that we're seeing? Like, is it just the fact, like, is it that there's been a breakthrough in how these models are being created? Is it just that we've added tons and tons of compute to these kind of like neural nets where they're able to learn way faster? Is it a combination? Has there been some kind of other breakthrough? and then from there, I guess we can go into where we're at now and how you're looking at things. But can you help like understand at a technical level, like why are we accelerating so hard right now?
That's a good way to put it, right? So, I mean, I think that it's pretty interesting because in the early days of like self driving, you'd kind of see this car get incrementally better, and then all of a sudden the car is like driving itself, right? And but it's still, even now there's problems with self driving cars. There's sort of long tail of problems to go and solve. I think the space as a whole, and that by the way has like that space has like thousands of engineers working around the clock with some of the best tools out there and on a very focused problem, make the car drive itself. Now, I think what you're seeing is that there's sort of a similar level of function and focus on natural language, and it's sort of depending on the domain. And now you could even say, you could argue multimodal vision generation, etc. These, I think, sort of like in if you look at like a lot of other consumer technology trends in the past as well, there's usually when you look at progress, it looks really really small when you're sort of zoomed in, it's like almost linear, and then when you zoom out, it looks almost exponential. And it kind of feels like we're in this phase of taking a technology, in this case the transformer model architecture, that came out a few years ago and is pretty fundamental to the advancements that you're seeing with large language models today, and
Yeah,
applying
and this
them
is
to the
the
consumer. Yeah.
yeah, this is the model, the transformer model that Google put out in like 2017 or whatever, that like really changed the whole nature of this industry, right? And like
Yeah.
that's
So
like
there's
a
this
whole other
paper. Totally, yeah. There's a paper came out, Attention is All You Need. I remember it was in a paper read. We read the paper, shortly after it came out. And we all kind of looked at it, scratched our heads, and were like, yeah, I mean, this seems cool, but it was one of those things where I don't think most people really saw the implications that this model. Most people being like, unless you were like in the space and could really, understand the potential here. The thing that the gap was that model architecture wasn't actually all you need or just sufficient. You actually need two more things that also we happen to be living through right now, which are massive amounts of data and compute. And the concept of like GPUs or being able to like parallelize, the sort of the training layer. So I think that it's sort of the convergence of that discovery and that
I see.
realization from a math perspective and the engineering work that's been done from for data platforms and for really like our ability to process large amounts of data that are allowing sort of the trend that you're seeing kind of taking off right now.
I
Yeah,
see. So it's kind of that, that breakthrough in, model architecture with the transformer paper combined with this mass amounts of actual training data that's been generated by whatever humans and internet
humans.
activity over the
Yeah,
last 30 years. Yeah. And then just tons and tons of compute that we've thrown at this problem. And actually, funnily enough, like gamers and crypto people are partially responsible for this because of uh, the crazy amounts of demand that they generate for GPUs. Which, at least for crypto, is no longer the case, but for yeah, I think for gaming it still is. But yeah, then that led to this whole other like story around Nvidia and
totally. Yeah.
yeah, that's super interesting.
Do you listen to
Uh,
Acquired? Have you heard that
yeah,
podcast?
yeah, I just actually heard that episode with Jensen Huang like
Yeah, it's a
a week
it's
or
a
two
three
ago.
parter. It's a three
Yeah,
parter. I highly recommend to anyone listening to this to go and check that out. It gives you a super comprehensive look of that particular technology, creating now one of the most valuable companies in the world. At the time, it seemed crazy, and in some ways, you could still argue it's kind of crazy in that it was a product that found product market fit in the convergence of the previous two things we talked about as well, which is this model architecture and the data existing that now you can kind of pull it all together to make this technology happen.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like maybe if there wasn't the surplus of GPUs, these like tinkerers never start playing around with these larger and larger kind of, whether it's data sets or larger and larger
Right.
models, and Yeah, it is
Like
very interesting.
how could you do it, right? Like you would
Yeah.
need a technology out there that helps you, I mean, a large part of this is like getting to a reasonable level of like a model that performs well and iterating on it and training it. And training is like a good analogy I think I'll throw out there for training is like evolution. Like literally, it's like you think of like training cycles as well. In evolution, we've existed over so many generations, millions of years. Humans have to like be able to talk the way that you and I are now, and it's not too different from creating a environment for a model to be able to learn the semantics of human language or just language in general, of understanding what things mean, what words mean. So like think how a kid might learn, what an apple is or what a word, what, different words are. That takes like it's taken millions of years of humans to have to encode that word and to our brain to be able to look at this and say, oh, this is something. This is an item. And so that's really what you're training and doing, with these models. And you need that not just the data, but the time to do that. Now you could have like one computer, one human cycle a million years and maybe get to where we are, or you can compress that down into a span of minutes if you parallelize that. So yeah.
Hmm, interesting. Um, okay, so then let's kind of continue this narrative that we're building, which is like now we're here. We've kind of you know laid a lot of the infrastructure, I guess, and like Nvidia is now what the fourth, fifth biggest company in the world. Um, ChatGPT has like 100 million monthly users. Like we're kind of in a different phase now. With AI generally, and with I'm sure like the companies that you're seeing pop up, and even a lot of the work that's being done across the industry. And I'm sure you can speak more to this, but like I guess like what has changed in the last like 5 6 years you've been in the industry, from specifically from like a not exactly investment perspective, but from like the companies that you see pop up, the big picture kind of trends and ideas that people talk about, and then maybe we can get into the actual kind of investment part of it. But yeah, from maybe like a big picture perspective first.
Yeah, so I think big picture. There's kind of looks like my camera ended up defocusing here. So I think like big picture. One important, I guess there's kind of a few things here. What I think maybe the one that stands out to me is like the fact that these models are so easily accessible in the form of APIs, and that they work out of the box is pretty game changing. Those two things are something that we take for granted a little bit today. That you can just go to a website and interact with this thing called ChatGPT, and it's a large language model underneath the hood, which just contains like the entirety of the human knowledge, basically, in the internet underneath it, trained a certain way, etc. Like the fact that you can even access that tech from like a simple API call or a simple chat interface is pretty game changing. So for context, for like the years before that, engineers would have to build like pretty before transformers you'd have to build like pretty complex data pipelines that streamed data through or took data did the way that predictions used to happen was, if you like, I like the Spotify example of like discover weekly, and it's not coincidence it's weekly, right? That's like a batch inference job. Basically takes all of your listing data and decides, okay, once a week you're going to get a new playlist, and we're going to do that for every one of our 100 million, a few 100 million active users that we have to get a new playlist in their inbox. That's a lot of data. That's a lot of data to process, right? And then if you go to something like search or real time ranking, if you go to Google and you're seeing results pop up, there's ML there too, which is like, how do you rank the results that are relevant to you? That's a different sort of data problem. It is a large amount of data, but you're trying to get a result back really fast. You're trying to get it back instantly. Now, if you look at something like ChatGPT, yeah, it takes a little bit of time to generate a result. It's not crazy long. It's actually somewhere in between those two product experiences of a large batch, sort of, large amount of data that you want to process, and you want the result almost real time. I think that technology being exposed and being optimized for that type of experience is really one of the most incredible things we're living through right now. It's why people keep saying that this time period is like never going to come back. It's because when the internet came out, it's crazy to say as like a product, or when Google came out as a product, like the world changed after that, right? Like you wouldn't go if you were going to go do a high school essay or college essay, you'd have to go to the library, check out an encyclopedia. Google drops, and after that, you're never going to have to go and do that again, right? Like you don't need to go buy encyclopedias. That business is like kind of dead. Everything is accessible on at the tip of your fingertips. That's sort of where we are with large language models. There's a lot of infra to go do to make them more usable, or to connect data to them to make them more usable. But at the end of the day, this is sort of, we're kind of in a watershed moment of, this technology is available easily, and it's that fundamental. So I think that's maybe the most sort of that trend to me stands out as being kind of fundamental to the time period we live in. And and I'm kind of curious what you're seeing too. But with startups, I think that a lot of startups, a lot of the space right now is people who are realizing that you can go build stuff really quickly on top of these APIs, and that
Yeah.
they provide a ton of value. So that's, I think, the really fundamental thing. It used to be a lot harder. It's become a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I mean, if I were to add anything to that, it's just that it seems like we're just moving up the stack almost, where it's like you're seeing, I mean, almost every day you're seeing a new foundation model come out, right? And it's like either a new model altogether, or it's like an upgrade of a model that's already out. You're seeing models for a lot of different kind of use cases. You're seeing text to video now. You're seeing text to audio. You're seeing image to audio. You're seeing so much stuff. So it seems like we're
You're
kind
seeing
of
these
hitting.
models string together too, by the way, like
Yeah,
text, speech, audio, and like becoming this like
right.
feedback loop in a way.
Yeah, so it seems like we're kind of getting past that, or like on top of that layer, and now it's more about the applications that stem from that. So yeah, I think I don't know, like I think that we're now going to see like a whole wave of applications and creators using these tools, because they're now pretty accessible. Like it's not like you need that much technical ability to start using this stuff. Like there was a time when like even ChatGPT was like not that great. You really had to be like, you had to like really prompt it well, and you had to actually like play around with it quite a bit to get it to do stuff that's actually valuable. But now that's not really the case. Like it can write this, and like I haven't really used it yet, but like Claude 3 that just came out today, I heard it's even, or like the
Yeah, it's
you
blowing
know
through leaderboards. Yeah.
it's like performance testing better than GPT-4 even. So it's like you couldn't get like production level code from these things. So yeah, I think like we're gonna see basically a whole new wave of stuff that's like now. I don't know. It's even from a fundraising perspective. Like it seems like most of the money went to companies building models or building like more kind of infrastructure, and now I would assume in the next couple of years it'll be more companies building applications.
Yeah, I mean, so I think one approach, a very bit like I kind of think a fundamental approach you can take as like an investor. And by the way, I think like thinking about yourself as an investor, even if you're just building, is a good framework to have. Right? Even investors invest money, you're investing time, right? So when you think about like as an investor, the sort of question a lot of people ask themselves is, what do you need to assume to be true before you make an investment? And I think what do you need to basically what do you need to assume about the world? What do you think is going to change? What is going to stay the same? And I think one thing to think about when you're thinking about like what is going to change is these models are going to get faster, they're going to get better, and they're going to get cheaper. So if you think about that, well, kind of what we're describing today, the foundation models that are coming out every single day, there's some performance improvement, there's some latency improvement, maybe they're getting cheaper, but you kind of have to assume that trend is going to continue until it doesn't. And we just don't know when it's going to stop. And there might be trade offs between different models, But you can also assume that you might be able to switch between different models for different applications. It's actually what one of the companies I invested in that has that thesis that helps with model routing using a sort of mathematical like optimization approach. That I think is an example of like, well, you have to assume that that's going to be a core part of the stack is picking the right model for the task. So in the same way, you could think about that from a consumer lens, which is okay. Well, we talk about all these benefits, but there's a lot of people that, like you're saying, like you're kind of alluding to, might be non-technical. They might not have, understandably, 5, 6, 7 years of like AI experience, and they want to go pick these things up off the shelf. Well, if you are in machine learning, there's common pitfalls. You know that there's problems in evaluating models. They don't work the way you always expect them to, and that can really matter when you're working on a self-driving car, where you make a wrong turn, you might hit someone, and it might matter when you're making medical decisions or legal decisions, or you're helping a business, you might lose a customer. And so understanding how these models work and making that easier is kind of another, one way to look at like this problem is going to be around for a little while. These models will have long tail challenges. And then on the consumer side, you can assume that pretty much every single industry is going to be impacted in some way. The tasks that you assumed, that are boring or menial, people are going to try to automate those. They're going to try and go after the high value tasks, and that are maybe easier to automate. And there's going to be some amount of value there that is going to be transferred towards the folks that can build the applications that can automate those tasks. And maybe it's not like fully automate, but it'll make your job a lot easier, make my job a lot easier to be able to be augmented. You'll be kind of superhuman based on the fact that these tools are so easy to use that they automate various kind of menial parts of your life. So that's maybe like the three things I'd call out that I'm noticing today. But they're also like anyone can kind of play that game or activity of what are the things you need to assume are going to change, what is going to be the same, and then try and find the area that you want to play in, to really make the most of this time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's very much the case. Like you kind of have to figure out where, like within this whole space, like where your strengths are and where you kind of have a maybe like a competitive advantage from a knowledge perspective or from an experience perspective that yeah is going to give you an upper hand, because otherwise I think it's hard to compete.
Yeah. What do you sort of have you kind of tried any of these tools to try to, are you using any of them more actively day to day?
I mean, I'm using as everything I can try. Yeah, like in the newsletter, I have like a tools section, I have like a tech section, so I try and play around with all of that stuff. I think some of the really interesting stuff right now is around audio. I think there's a lot of like text to audio and even image to audio tools that are popping up, that are like just like very gonna they're like just gonna let people be super creative. So like even 11 Labs, like there was a Sora or not, was it 11 Labs? No. It was not 11 Labs. 11 Labs obviously is doing some crazy stuff in their own right, but the Pika is this company that is putting out, like I think they're actually doing text to video, but they did a text to audio thing, where they took a Sora demo output, and they basically like did like a lip sync over it. Um, and yeah, so I think like around audio, I think there's going to be like a whole new wave where there's just a ton of foundation models either coming out or that have recently come out in the past few months. And now we're kind of getting to like the mainstream adoption of some of these applications like Musically or like Suno. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing I'm looking for. Even like obviously text to video is the one that has gotten a lot of attention, but I think audio will be pretty huge in the coming months. And then probably video, like I don't know, whenever Sora comes out, I think that'll
Yeah,
be
you think
like
Sora is going to be the killer there? Like, what did you see about it? Was like, did you see anything with Pika as a like beyond just the demo, or was anything kind of like sit out?
no Pika. I can't remember if it was Pika or one of the other ones that's like in beta, but I used it and it was just not that great. Like it was like very, it felt like very like stock imagey, where it would just be like not exactly an image, but like it would be a video, but it would just be like something like a quick
Yeah.
pan across like a landscape or
Right.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Just
So
it didn't do what you wanted it to do. Basically, it was doing something
yeah,
else.
exactly. So I think that's basically the story with most of the text to video models or tools that I've used. Um, the audio stuff though is like it's pretty much there. I think the thing that is holding most of these things back is licensing issues. Like I think the Kanye or the whatever the Drake and the Weekend song like that blew up and it caused a ton of issues. Like I listened to an interview with the founder of the company who like not the guy who made the song, but the guy who made the application
Yeah.
used to make the song, and they basically had to take out those people's voices. And now it's just like random voices. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest holdup. But
Like
at
creative
some point,
licensing.
yeah, exactly. But at some point, I think like the stuff, like the tools, just become too like fun, and cool to use, and so I think that point is coming pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you can do the attribution back to those people in some way, would that make it like okay? And would they be okay with it, right? And
Well,
then there's
that's the yeah.
it's also sort of like the permissionless sort of layer, which I know you're super deep on as well. Like once you have open source, you can't really control what other people are going to do, right? Like you can just make it and put it out there. Then it's a distribution thing of okay, if Spotify decides to like put it up on their site or YouTube, then they have to license, then they have to deal with the attribution problem. But the creation now is like permissionless because the data is already out there, right? It's open source. So yeah,
Yeah, I think the main issue is like that. At least like the founder of that platform, Musically or whatever. I forget what the actual app is called. It might not be Musically, but he was saying like they got like a DMCA notice or whatever the actual term is, but basically just the artists like The Weeknd or Drake or whatever is like, hey, you can't use my voice. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, that's the main thing. I think weirdly enough, like actually, I think like this is where blockchain is actually a good solution, but it's like many years from that being a reality.
yeah, being
Um,
able to like attribute trace back, where is that data
yeah,
being?
yeah. I mean, it's like basically just like a timestamp almost. You're just like it's just like a digital signature. You just sign like, okay, you can use my voice, and you can just automate a royalty payment back every time that's
Yeah,
used or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, okay. I mean, honestly, like this, this like investment kind of side of things interests me quite a bit, just because like I'm not a technical person at all. So it's like I'm more interested in like what are people building now? Like what does the future look like? Like what are some of the more interesting like whether or not you can call it the companies themselves, but like trends or kind of just areas of interest to you right now.
yeah. I mean, I think you know, I'll say there's sort of a like a markets or a product thesis a little bit to this, but to be honest, like now I have to hold true that like every industry is going to be impacted by AI. So before it was like, okay, what is accessible to be to what is possible with the tech we had a couple of years ago. I think there was a lot of work to go and build some infra, build some tech there. That was sort of some of the early investments. I think that's still really interesting. There's a lot to go and build. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built. But from a consumer side, I think I'm just more interested in the types of founders, to be honest, at this stage, because there's some people that they're gonna pick a problem that sounds interesting, but they don't have a ton of experience around. But it like sounds interesting. They want to go pick it up, try and solve something in the space. I don't think many of those founders are going to make it. They're the space is moving too fast where if you're really truly passionate about a problem, you're going to be able to go and you're going to stay up and work on it harder and innovate on it faster than I think someone who's just like casually interested in a subject. So one thought is like founders who really know their shit and know what know the industry in and out that they're going to go and try and disrupt. And then the other part of it, that's I kind of view that as like, maybe you think of that as like the business minded founder, the user minded, customer minded founder. And then the other founder persona is the technical one who's going to be do a lot of the sort of the infrastructure, the consumer building. And that person to me needs to be super adaptable now. And that means that they probably have to be like trying the latest tech when it comes out, using the latest foundation model. And my thought there is that like if you built your whole application on top of GPT 3.5 a year ago, you'd be disrupted by someone building on top of GPT 4 Turbo today. And who even knows what the next thing is going to look like tomorrow? I'm obviously using super simplistic terms like 3.5, 4, but there's a ton of stuff that I think we're GPT 4 isn't even a year old. Like it's that new in terms of technology. So who knows what models are going to come out a year from now? Who knows what sort of new technology and infra might be out a year from now? So you want someone technical who can adapt and know what the strengths are of certain approaches, but also has an engineering kind of technical mindset to be able to problem solve, get around roadblocks. So I think the combination of those two traits is usually what interests me more, even than certain product or market hypotheses now, because it's not, maybe part of it is also like just figuring out which industries are more likely to be disrupted sooner. But at the end of the day, in 10 years' time, I don't think there's going to be an industry that isn't going to be disrupted. So it's more picking the right people to go and solve problems in the space, to me, at least at this stage.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Um, all right, let's finish it off with just some wild predictions. You have any hot takes? Interesting predictions, things we haven't mentioned yet for this year, for the next, let's say, 5 years.
Whoa,
Who knows what'll
five
happen in
years,
10 years? But yeah,
5 years. I mean, I kind of like, there's this Vinod Khosla, quote from like, I think, in the last year or two, where he said like, if you'd asked him like 5 years ago, like, when's the first time that, you think AI is going to be in like the doctor's office, he would have said, sorry, let me try and take that one again. Um, So I think there's this like Vinod Khosla quote from like a year or two ago, where when asked like when do you think AI is going to enter the doctor's office, and he thought, oh, maybe in the next, like, I think it was in like the next 5 years you'll see AI in the doctor's office, right? And what does that mean? Maybe it's like transcribing what a doctor is saying or a patient is saying, and then like maybe making some recommendation or suggesting what to do. Well, I actually like his hot take on top of that, which is probably in about, I think he said 10 years' time, he thinks it'll be malpractice for AI to not be in the doctor's office. Meaning it's going to be so powerful that to not use it, it's like, basically, you're doing a disservice to a customer. So I think, and that's like a pretty high bar, right? Like doctors have to go through training for years and years to get to that point, and to make a prediction where it's actually going to be, it's going to perform better than a human is I think the right way to look at it for a lot of industries. So to me, I think, okay, well, what are other industries? Like, I think a lawyer, not consulting AI for making a case in 10 years time might be, considered like that should be like, you should be really worried if your lawyer isn't using AI. You should be worried if you're employing someone that isn't using that technology. It's kind of analogous to not using the internet when it came out, right? Like, you'd be foolish to go back to the library and pick up an encyclopedia. You want someone who's going to be, using the latest and trusted technology. Obviously, it has to be safe, but yeah, that's my hot take. That will what we think is kind of crazy today, which is like using ChatGPT to solve tasks in our daily lives. It's going to start seeming crazy to not do that, and probably in the next 5 years.
amazing. Aman, this is very fun. We're going to keep these going for sure. So this is not the last time our audience will see you, but thank you so much for being the first guest on the AI Renaissance podcast. This is a blast, man.
Yeah, likewise. Great to see you, and thanks for bringing me on. Always happy to riff on the acceleration.
All right, we'll leave it at that, and we'll see you soon. Have a good rest of your weekend.